My name is Ella. I'm 29 years old. The first time my husband asked me for a divorce, I was trying to lift my own left leg back onto a hospital bed. It was late winter in Chicago. That mean gray everywhere. Dirty snow banked in the parking lot outside my rehab suite. Half melted, half frozen. Like the city itself could not decide whether to thaw out or keep punishing people a little longer. Inside, everything smelled like antiseptic, stale coffee, expensive hand lotion, and that wet, slushy cold people drag in on the bottoms of their shoes. The sheets scratched against my thighs every time I moved. My hip burned deep inside the joint in this electric, drilling way that made my teeth touch before I even realized I was clenching them. There were pill bottles on the tray table, a plastic water cup, a paper cup from the morning, and next to the bed, my walker, gray rubber grips, cold aluminum frame. It stood there like an insult with handles. I had been learning how to stand again. Not beautifully, not bravely, just slowly, in humiliating little pieces. A nurse had helped me sit up earlier, and I was trying to do this part by myself because once your body betrays you, you become greedy for tiny victories, even stupid ones, even getting your own leg onto a bed. The fluorescent lights in that room made everything look harsher than it was. My skin, my scars, the bruises still yellowing along my side. Even the bouquet my mother had sent looked tired under those lights. Even my own hands looked unfamiliar, like someone had loaned them to me. Then I heard him, not his voice, his shoes, dress shoes in the hallway. Measured, clean, confident, no hesitation. Adrian always walked like a man who expected space to recognize him and move. Then the door opened. His cologne entered first, cedar, citrus, money. For months after that day, I would smell that same brand in elevators and hotel lobbies and immediately want out before the doors even closed. He stood there in a navy wool coat with leather gloves tucked in one hand, scarf loose at his neck, hair still in place, looking polished enough for a firm website photo. I was in rehab socks, a loose cardigan, and the kind of exhaustion that made brushing my hair feel like a negotiation. He looked like life still fitted him. I looked like I had to request permission from my own body before shifting 2 inches. "Hey," he said. That was how my husband came to divorce me after my accident. A one soft syllable, like he was checking on a delayed reservation. I braced one hand behind me and pushed myself a little higher against the bed. Pain flashed. Bright. Mean. I hid the worst of it because even then, part of me still hated giving him visible proof that this was hard. "You're early," I said. He glanced at the walker, then at the window, then at me. I had a gap between meetings. A gap. Not time. Not concern. A gap. My doctor had been there 10 minutes earlier talking about nerve response, muscle activation, scar tightness, pain management, and the very real possibility that I would move faster if I stopped translating embarrassment into personal failure. Then she left, and there is something cruel about the quiet after medical optimism. Once the professional hope goes out the door, yet it's just you and the body you still don't fully trust. Adrian set a Starbucks cup on the counter. Not in my hand, not within easy reach, on the counter. "I got you tea," he said. I looked at it. Chamomile. I hate chamomile. He knew that. Or he used to. "Thank you," I said anyway. His jaw shifted. A tiny movement. But I knew him. That was impatience. That was a man already irritated by how long reality was taking. He stayed standing. And in that small choice, before he said anything else, I felt something in me go cold. People do not stay standing when they are there to remain. He eventually took the chair by the window and crossed one ankle over his knee. Comfortable. Contained. Prepared. "I've been thinking," he said. "There are sentences your body hears before your ears do." As something in me tightened so fast, it almost felt like another injury. The walker stood beside me like a witness. The city outside stayed far away behind thick glass. I held the blanket in both hands and waited. This isn't working. I stared at him. Not because I had not heard him, because a stupid, surviving part of me still expected him to correct himself. This isn't working because I'm scared too. This isn't working and I hate who I've been. This isn't working and I want us to fix it. But Adrian was not a man who fixed things once they became inconvenient. He replaced them. I don't think either of us wants to live like this, he said. Like this. He said it softly, carefully, but his eyes flicked to the walker again. My mouth went dry. Live like what? He exhaled through his nose, annoyed already. Yet because I was making him translate himself into something uglier and more honest. In hospitals, in rehab, in this cycle? You're miserable, Ella. I'm stretched thin. We barely talk unless it's about schedules or meds or appointments. I laughed, just once. Small, ugly, disbelieving. Schedules? I said. I got hit by a truck. His expression hardened. I know that. No, I said. You know the summary. You know the convenient version. You don't know what it costs me to stand up. You don't know what it feels like to need help sitting down. You don't know what it feels like when your own leg won't listen. You don't know because you stopped being here before the swelling even went down. He leaned back, closed off. That look people get when they want your pain to sound less specific because detail makes cruelty harder to defend. I'm not doing this, he said. And there it was, the real crack. Not even the divorce. That, the irritation, the refusal to stay inside my reality for 30 more seconds. He looked at me like I was making a scene out of something administrative. Then he said, I've spoken to an attorney. I'm filing. My fingers brushed the tray table. One of the pill bottles knocked lightly against another. Such a tiny sound. But I still remember it. Because he kept talking right over it. He had planned this. Of course he had. I think it's better to be honest now than drag out something that isn't recoverable. Recoverable. That word. In that room, with my rehab exercises written on a whiteboard, with my body still stitched, with the bruise from a failed IV blooming on the inside of my arm. I almost admired the precision of it. So cruelty can be very elegant when it belongs to someone practiced in self-justification. You're divorcing me while I'm learning how to walk again, I said. He looked away for half a second, just enough to prove shame had at least entered the building. I'm trying not to waste more years pretending. Pretending what? That we still have a marriage. The lights hummed overhead. Some machine somewhere down the hall beeped twice. Outside, a siren moved thinly through the city. I had loved him for 4 years, been married to him for 2, built a life with him in a high-rise apartment overlooking the river. Dinner reservations, club events, Christmas parties under expensive chandeliers, to long summer weekends at the lake house in Michigan where people smiled at Adrian like he had always belonged in a life polished enough to reflect him back beautifully. I let them think that. I let him think it too. Not because I wanted to deceive him, because I wanted one clean thing. Just one. Love without accounting, affection without paperwork. A marriage where I did not have to explain what was mine and what wasn't. My family had money long before Adrian met me. Old Chicago property on my mother's side, a distribution business my grandfather built, and my father expanded into logistics and medical supply contracts, quiet trusts, structured investments, commercial holdings, board seats. I had income streams Adrian never really understood because he never bothered to ask the sort of questions that reveal structure. What he knew I came from comfort. He did not understand that comfort had my signature on it. He assumed our apartment was some generous family arrangement. He thought the club membership was a courtesy. He thought the Aspen trips just happened. He thought the lake house was kind of ours. He thought many things, mostly because he liked the atmosphere of wealth more than the anatomy of it. He earned very well. He dressed beautifully. He knew how to sound intelligent over cocktails. But performance is not the same thing as foundation, and in our marriage, I let him keep the illusion that our life sat evenly on both shoulders. Now he was walking out of that life with the confidence of a man leaving a theater before the ending because he thinks he already knows the plot. Did you wait until I was stuck in here? I asked. Woo, was that part of the plan? His face tightened. You're not stuck. I looked at the walker, then at the call button clipped to my blanket, then back at him. He realized it the second I did. How stupid that sounded. How revealing. He stood up and went to the window instead. Back half turned to me. I can't be your caretaker, he said. Something hot moved into my throat. I never asked you to be. You needed more than I can give. No, I said. I needed a husband. He did not answer. And that silence told me everything shouting never could. He left the envelope on the table beside the untouched tea. Thick, cream-colored. My name typed neatly across the front. My married name. Soon to be returned like something I had worn by mistake. I'm trying to do this the right way, he said. The right way, that phrase. People say that when they want moral credit for abandoning you cleanly. He looked at me one last time. Not tenderly, not even guiltily, just ready for the scene to be over. Then, he walked out. The sound of his shoes faded first. The cologne stayed longer. And I sat there in that rehab bed, skin prickling under cheap hospital sheets, body still stitched back together from the crash, staring at divorce papers while dirty snow hardened outside the window. I did not scream. I did not throw anything. I pressed the heel of my hand against the center of my chest and tried to breathe without making my incisions ache. A nurse came in 20 minutes later and asked whether I needed help with dinner. I said no. Then yes. Then no. Again. That night I cried so hard my incision sites throbbed, not pretty crying, not cinematic crying. The kind that makes your face blotchy and your throat raw and your body angry at you for adding more pain to what already hurts. My mother arrived the next morning in a black cashmere coat with a legal pad under one arm and a face so still it scared me. She kissed my forehead. She sat down. She read every page of the packet. No commentary, no gasp, no dramatic outrage, just page after page after page. Then she set it down on the bed. Eat something, she said. I stared at her. Mom. She pulled the chair closer and reached for my hand, careful around the bruising from old IV sites. Eat something first, she repeated. Then we call Vivian. Vivian Mercer had handled divorces, estate disputes, and enough quiet family wars to know exactly how rich men behave when they mistake access for ownership. She was 63, a silver-haired, elegant in a severe way, and carried the kind of reputation that made lazy opposing counsel suddenly develop respect for deadlines. By noon, she was on speaker. She asked for dates, trust structures, premarital agreements, asset schedules, titles, who signed when, what Adrian knew, what he assumed. I answered from a hospital bed while adjusting the blanket over my damaged leg. My mother made notes in small, neat handwriting. When I finished, there was a brief pause. Then Vivian said, very calmly, "He appears to be a profoundly uninformed man." My mother shut her eyes for 1 second. I almost laughed. It hurt too much to fully do it, but still. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," Vivian said, "your husband seems to have confused proximity to wealth with ownership." Well, we'll correct that. There are moments when oxygen returns to a room in sentence form. That was one of them. My father came that evening straight from downtown, still in his overcoat, tie slightly loosened, looking angrier than I had seen him in years. He stood at the foot of the bed and asked only one question. "He filed now?" "Yes." He nodded once, not sharply, quietly. Coward, that was all. But my father does not waste words when he means them. My older sister Nora arrived later with a Walmart bag full of things I had forgotten to ask for. Better socks, unscented lotion, a charger, a notebook, dry shampoo, granola bars I could tolerate after medication. She set the bag on the bed, looked at the packet, then looked at me and said, "Good, let him go discover retail pricing." I smiled for the first time in days. And not because it was funny, because I felt myself come back into outline. I was hurt, not erased. That mattered. Recovery changed after that. Not easier, clearer. Every morning, physical therapy. A woman named Marisol with forearms like steel cables and a voice that made encouragement sound like a dare. She taught me how to shift weight correctly, how not to collapse into pain before it even arrived, how to stand without apologizing to the room for taking time. The walker dug into my palms, sweat slid down my back under the thin rehab shirt. Some days I made it 10 feet and cried in the bathroom afterward. Some days I made it 20 and felt something like anger turn useful. Again, Marisol would say. I'd glare at her. Again, she'd repeat. I hate you. No, you don't. And she'd be right. And because she was the first person in weeks who treated my body like something rebuilding, not something tragic. At night, paperwork, trust documents, property records, prenup schedules Adrian had clearly skimmed with the confidence of a man certain he would never need the inconvenient parts. The apartment on Wacker? Mine through a premarital trust. The club membership? Paid through an account tied to our family office. The Aspen trips? Mine. The lake house in Michigan? Mine. The black Range Rover he drove and once referred to over dinner as our car situation? Leased through a holding company connected to my side. Our. It turns out some men adore shared language until shared obligations become itemized. The deeper I went, the clearer it became that Adrian had not built the life he had been performing inside. He had furnished himself with it. He was successful. Yes, but success is not the same as infrastructure. He sent a few carefully worded emails through his attorney. The language was almost funny. Reasonable expectations, equitable access, marital lifestyle, temporary accommodations. He wrote like a man trying to turn comfort into a legal philosophy. Vivian answered every message with documents. Just documents. Title records, trust schedules, account separation, lease terms, premarital asset maps. No insults, no lectures, no wasted emotion, just facts. It was almost beautiful. A week later, Adrian's key fob to the building stopped working. The apartment had never belonged to him. He texted me directly for the first time in days. Adrian, is there a problem with the front desk? Yes, I was in my rehab suite with an ice pack melting against my hip when the message came through. I stared at it. Then I handed my phone to Nora, who was sitting in the corner eating the sushi I could not have because my stomach was still a bureaucratic nightmare thanks to pain meds. She read it. Then she smiled. Answer him, she said. With what? The truth. So I typed, me. There isn't a problem. Your access has ended. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Adrian. I still live there. I read that twice. Then typed, me. No, you stayed there. That line carried me through 2 full days of physical therapy. He moved into a furnished rental after that. Then, not long after, into something smaller with no valet and a view of brick instead of water. I did not stalk his life. I did not have to. And cities like Chicago deliver information through walls, donor boards, private clubs, and women who pretend not to gossip while absolutely doing it. Someone saw him at the county clerk's office trying to pursue some angle related to access and occupancy, case filing, response motion, paperwork he should never have bothered with. There was no angle. Another mutual said he had been asking about club sponsorship requirements because his membership had become complicated. Another told Nora he complained over drinks that my family was making things ugly. ugly, as if consequences only become unattractive when they arrive correctly. While he was discovering what his assumptions were actually worth, I was learning stairs. The rehab center had a short training flight, 4 steps, metal rail, no glamour. Marisol stood half a foot behind me while I put my good leg up first, then carefully drew the weaker one behind it. Every inch of my hip screamed. My breathing turned shallow, sweat ran cold between my shoulder blades. "You're not as fragile as you think," Marisol said. "I don't feel strong." "Strength isn't a feeling," she said. "It's evidence." I wrote that down that night in the notebook Nora brought me. A few pages later, I wrote something else. Some departures are losses, some are amputations, some are surgeries. At the time, Adrian leaving felt like all three. Later, time sorted them. The divorce process dragged in that expensive, polished way only very good lawyers can sustain. Adrian was not foolish enough to challenge the prenup directly. He was arrogant enough to test the edges around it. He implied dependence. I suggested I had relied on his income, tried to frame our marriage as a jointly maintained ecosystem that would unjustly collapse without transitional support to him. To him. Vivian dismantled every single claim with a serenity so complete it almost felt religious. One afternoon she came to the rehab center herself, navy suit, sharp collar, folder balanced on one knee. "He's pivoting," she said. "To what?" "To image. Men like this do that when documents fail." I knew what she meant before she explained it. He would make himself tired, overwhelmed, emotionally abandoned, the husband who tried, the man who could not carry the burden, the victim of a difficult season. There are always people willing to believe a polished man if the story lets them keep admiring him. Adrian had always counted on that. "Do we respond?" I asked. Vivian looked at me over her glasses. "No," she said. "Dignity is often more convincing than rebuttal, especially when the facts are filed." I nodded. Then, because it had been sitting inside me for days, I asked the question I had not yet said aloud. "Did he think I was helpless?" Vivian closed the folder. "He thought vulnerability changed your legal standing," she said. "It didn't. It only revealed his character." That landed somewhere deep. Deeper than the divorce, deeper than the money, deeper, even, than betrayal. Because the accident had taken months from my body. It had not taken my name. It had not taken my structure. It had not taken the years of quiet intelligence I had spent building safeguards around a life Adrian enjoyed, without ever fully understanding. By early spring, I graduated from the walker to a cane on good days and stubbornness on bad ones. I went back to the apartment once to collect personal things before the final arrangements closed around it. My mother came with me. The doorman hugged me too carefully. The elevator smelled like polished steel and expensive detergent. Inside, the apartment looked exactly the same, and completely fake. The cream sofa, the art Adrian used to explain to guests as if he had selected it himself. The bar cart he always restocked before parties, the throw blanket folded just so over the chair. Everything looked staged, like a magazine spread built around misunderstanding. Half his suits were gone from the closet. There was a ring from a Starbucks cup on the kitchen marble he had not bothered to wipe. But I stood there staring at that pale circle for longer than made sense. Not because it mattered, because ordinary carelessness sometimes cuts deeper than dramatic betrayal. My mother wrapped stemware and paper at the dining table while I stood by the window with my cane angled against the hardwood and looked down at the river. "You can sell this place," she said, "or keep it. There's no rush." "I don't know what I want yet. You don't have to know today." I watched a boat move slowly through the gray water below. Then I said, "I really loved him." My mother stopped wrapping the glass in her hands. "I know. I made excuses for him, for years. I thought marriage meant surviving bad seasons." She came over, adjusted my coat collar, and did that thing mothers do when they touch you gently but say something with a blade inside it. Marriage is not a test of how much neglect a woman can spiritualize, she said. I looked back at the river. Something in me went quiet then. Not dead, not numb, settled. Adrian started dating someone before the divorce was fully dry. Of course he did. Her name was Lila, 26, beautiful in a deliberate way, photographed well, dressed like she understood the assignment in every room. I had met her once before at a club dinner. She laughed too hard at Adrian's jokes and asked me whether our Aspen place was family-owned or just like a lucky thing. I smiled then and changed the subject. Apparently he had too. He let her believe what he had once believed beside me. Men who mistake reflected light for their own brilliance often prefer women who enjoy mirrors. For a while they looked happy. By happy, I mean visible. Boat pictures. Private room dinners. A 4th of July rooftop party where Adrian wore sunglasses and the exact expression of a man hoping to be seen being fine. Nora sent me one blurry screenshot with a caption. Give it 6 billing cycles. I laughed so hard I had to put down my tea. Healing deserves comedy where it can find it. By summer, I could drive again. The first time I sat behind the wheel alone, I held it for almost a full minute before turning the key. My scar pulled when I twisted. My lower back objected. My pulse ran too high. Still, I drove. 2 blocks, then 6, then to Starbucks, then to therapy, then to a board meeting. Freedom comes back through repetition. So does dignity. I stopped measuring recovery by what still hurt. I started measuring it by what no longer controlled me. I resumed work slowly, and a call first, then a strategy session, then in-person visits connected to the rehabilitation initiative I had been building before the crash. There was something almost absurd about walking into hospital wings with a cane and discussing mobility support funding with administrators while my own body was still finishing the lesson privately. But it mattered. The work mattered. And people were kind in the right way. Not pitying, not theatrical. Just careful at first, then normal. Normal is underrated after trauma. I changed the way I dressed too. Not to prove anything, to remember myself. Structured wool coats, tailored trousers that worked with the stiffness still living in my hip. Low heels when I could manage them. Gold jewelry. Hair done because I like the ritual of reassembling myself. A restoration is private before it becomes visible. By August, Adrian's life had begun to shed its borrowed shine. Lila disappeared first. A friend from the Gold Coast circuit told Nora she had moved on after Adrian started canceling trips and getting weird about money. Another said she had apparently been surprised to learn he did not own the apartment everyone associated with him. There is no heartbreak, quite like a gold digger discovering the gold belonged to the wife. Then his invitations thinned. Then some networking dinners changed shape around him. Not because I campaigned. I didn't. Because people in our world can forgive many things. They forgive affairs. They forgive ego. They forgive vanity if the tailoring is still good. What they hate is bad judgment. And leaving your injured wife while she is still in rehab reads as catastrophic judgment in rooms built on reputation. The story spread the way these stories always spread. Never officially, always efficiently. In parking lots after fundraisers, across appetizer tables, in low voices near coat checks. Did you hear what happened with Ella? He left while she was still recovering. Most of that life was hers. He had no idea. Can you imagine? I never had to raise my voice. Reality spoke for me in a register Adrian understood much better than love. In November, the divorce was finalized. Clean terms, minimal noise, mercifully brief courtroom appearance. I wore a camel coat and black boots to the courthouse, signed the last set of papers with a hand that barely shook. Outside, the Chicago wind sliced down the street hard enough to water my eyes. Nora handed me coffee in a paper cup and said, "Congratulations on your administrative freedom." I laughed. Then I got in the car and cried. Not because I wanted him back, because grief does not leave in one noble sweep. You can know someone failed you and still mourn the future you protected for them. That is one of the crueler truths adulthood teaches. At Christmas, my parents hosted at the lake house, the same house Adrian used to move through like he belonged to the architecture. White lights wrapped the trees. The kitchen smelled like rosemary, butter, cinnamon, and wood smoke drifting in every time the mudroom door opened. My nieces ran through the living room in red pajamas, old jazz records played low. But my father stood by the window with a bourbon he barely touched, and that quiet contentment men get when they can see their daughters are still standing. I watched the lights reflected in the dark glass and realized I felt something new. Not triumph, not even peace exactly. Relief, a softer thing. I no longer woke up expecting to negotiate tenderness from someone already retreating. I no longer mistook endurance for devotion. I no longer confused being needed with being cherished. The accident had broken bone. Adrian had broken illusion. Only one of those healed straight. In the new year, I stepped into a larger role in our family's philanthropic arm and expanded our rehab initiative into 3 more hospital systems. There were meetings, site visits, press appearances I could not always avoid. At one regional business magazine profile with a photo of me standing beside a mobility access project in a navy coat with the skyline behind me. Adrian saw it. I know because he texted me that night. Adrian, saw the article. Congratulations, you look good. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I turned the phone face down and went back to reading. Another message came in. Adrian, would you be open to meeting sometime, just to talk? People rarely ask just to talk when listening is not the real objective. Weeks passed before I answered. Me. I don't think that's necessary. He sent one more. Adrian, I owe you an apology. That line did not move me. An apology offered after your social and financial decline is often just loneliness in a suit. I did not answer. Spring came back to Chicago the way it always does. A half apology, half performance. Tulips in front of stone buildings, champagne at fundraisers, museum dinners, board events. The whole city pretending winter had not happened. In late April, I attended a charity benefit at a restored historic building on Michigan Avenue. Tall windows, creamstone columns, candlelight everywhere. The kind of room designed to flatter everyone slightly past their actual best. I wore a black silk dress with a structured jacket and low heels. No cane. My hip still stiffened after long evenings, but by then I knew the difference between pain that warned and pain that remembered. The band was soft. Glassware glowed. People spoke in those warm, polished tones expensive rooms seemed to produce automatically. I was near the silent auction tables talking with a hospital executive about veteran rehab expansion when I felt it. Not a chill, recognition. Adrian had entered the room. He stood near the bar in a charcoal suit that fit just a little worse than his old ones used to. From a distance, he still looked like Adrian. That was the thing. Men like him always hold together well at 20 feet. Up close, consequence begins to show. There was strain around his eyes, something thinner around the mouth, a dryness to him. He found me almost immediately. Of course he did. Once you lose the source, you learn to identify the current. I finished my conversation first. I did not rush. I did not hide. I did not save him the walk over. He approached with a drink he was not drinking. Ella. Adrian. Up close, he looked older. Not by age, by cost. It's been a while, he said. Yes? His eyes flicked, almost automatically, toward where the cane would have been months earlier. You look strong. I am. A beat passed. The band changed songs. A server moved behind us carrying crab cakes on a silver tray. He cleared his throat. I meant what I said, about apologizing. I folded one hand over the other and waited. That was all I did. Waited. Silence is useful, especially around weak apologies. It makes them show their seams. He looked down briefly, then back at me. I handled everything badly, he said. Worse than badly. I was overwhelmed, and I convinced myself I was being honest when really I was being selfish. At least he had finally reached the correct noun. I was cruel, he added. Yes, I said. That surprised him. You could see it. Men often prepare for anger because it allows them to perform steadiness in response. Calm agreement leaves them standing alone with the ugliness of what they said themselves. He shifted his weight. I didn't understand what you were carrying. No, I said. You didn't. I'm not just talking about the money. I know. For a second, he almost looked like the man I once loved. The version who reached for my hand in taxis. The one who kissed my forehead absent-mindedly in the kitchen. The one I spent too long defending in my own head because admitting what he was would have collapsed too much at once. Then it changed. Need entered his face, regret with an agenda. I miss you, he said quietly. There it was. Not I was wrong. Not you deserved better. Not I hope your life is good, I miss you. And the sentence of a man still centering his own weather. I held his gaze. You miss being protected from what things cost, I said. His face shifted, just slightly, but enough. You think that's all this is? I said, you left when my body became inconvenient, and only understood my value after your comfort left with me. He swallowed. I cared about you. I know you cared, I said. In the way some people care about a beautiful home. Deeply, while it serves them. That landed. His jaw tightened. Around us, the room kept moving. Glasses touched. Someone laughed near the donor wall. A woman in emerald silk crossed between us and the bar with a packet in her hand. The world did not stop for his reckoning. I was grateful for that. I was under pressure, he said. So was I said. I was relearning how to sit up. That one hit him clean. Good. Not because I wanted drama, because accuracy has its own sharpness. He looked at me then in a way I had never fully seen before. Not charming, not polished, not controlled, just bare. And in that look I understood, he finally saw it. He had not left a broken woman. He had left the structure that had quietly softened his life. The apartment, the access, the invitations, the reputation, the financial cushion, the invisible labor, the emotional translation, the private comfort of being loved by someone better than he had earned. You thought freedom would feel glamorous, I said. What you found was retail price. A rough breath escaped him. Some lines life gives you only once. You take them cleanly and keep walking. Ella, no, I said softly. You don't get to come back now that life has introduced itself properly. I'm not asking to come back. That was not fully true, maybe not consciously, but close enough to truth to be related. You're asking not to be the man who did this, I said. But you are, and I'm finally grateful you showed me early. His eyes got bright for half a second. Not tears. Wounded ego has its own moisture. I really did love you, he said. I believed him. And that was the saddest part. He had loved me. Just not enough to remain decent when love became inconvenient. The accident didn't ruin my life, I said. It exposed it. He said nothing. I stepped back, not from fear, from closure. I hope you become someone who deserves the next person who trusts you, I told him. But that person will not be me. Then I left him there with his untouched drink and his late-arriving self-knowledge. I did not look back. A few minutes later, the hospital executive found me near the donor wall and asked whether I was still interested in expanding the mobility program into 2 suburban facilities. I said yes. And we talked funding. timeline, staffing, real logistics, useful ones. That night, when I got home, I stood by my apartment window with the city spread below me and took off my earrings slowly. My hip ached in that dull, familiar way it does after too many standing hours and too much history in one evening. Scar tissue still tightens when rain moves in. Some mornings, I still stretch carefully before getting out of bed. There are days I can remember that rehab room so vividly I can smell the antiseptic again, hear the pill bottles click, feel the fluorescent lights flatten everything into one ugly truth. But memory stopped being a prison the moment I understood what it was for. It is not there to drag me backward. It is there to mark distance. A year after the crash, I drove past the recovery center on the way to a meeting. I pulled over across the street for a minute. The snow was gone. The sidewalks were full. A woman in scrubs came out holding coffee. A man in a back brace stood near the curb waiting for a rideshare. Somewhere inside that building, I knew someone was taking their first painful steps back toward themselves. I sat there with both hands on the wheel and thought about the woman I had been in that bed, stitched, humiliated, us abandoned, still trying to understand how love could leave so neatly. I wanted to reach through time and tell her this: you are not being reduced, you are being refined. And this: when a weak man leaves, he takes noise with him, and when the noise goes, you finally hear yourself. I did not need Adrian to fail in order to heal, but watching life stop cushioning him did clarify a few things. Consequences are cleaner than revenge speeches. Paperwork can be more intimate than romance, and money does not ruin love nearly as often as entitlement does. He divorced me after my accident, believing I had become less. What he learned later was much simpler. He had always been standing inside value he did not create. And once I stopped funding the illusion, he had to meet himself without velvet around the edges. As for me, I kept going. Physical therapy became strength work. Strength work became trust in my own body. Board meetings became leadership. Pity became respect. My scar faded from angry red to pale silver. It never vanished. I never wanted it to. It reminds me that surviving is not the same thing as returning unchanged. I travel again now. I host Thanksgiving every other year when I feel like filling a room with people who actually know the difference between being loved and being used. I keep my own apartment, my own accounts, my own name exactly where I want it. I still notice small things I never used to honor properly. A Walmart receipt on a counter, a DMV envelope in the mail stack, a Starbucks cup sweating onto a conference table, and a hand reaching automatically to steady a chair for me without making it into a performance. Ordinary life has become precious in a way it was not before. Stability is not glamorous. It is holy, and I do not confuse being chosen with being safe anymore. That may be the cleanest lesson I got out of all of it. Not from the divorce, not even from the accident, from the rebuilding, from learning exactly how little I needed the version of love that disappeared the minute it had to lift weight. He thought he was leaving a burden. What he was really leaving was the best structure in his life. And me. I stopped calling abandonment the end of my story the day I realized it had introduced me to myself.